Senator Ben Sasse is just out with a new book called The Vanishing American Adult, Our Coming-of-Age Crisis, How to Build a Culture of Self-Reliance. Senator, thank you for joining us. Going to get to the book in a moment. First, though, the news of the week. You just heard General McMaster right there and his reaction to that meeting with the Russians, where the president was apparently freelancing when he talked about James Comey and said the pressure was off after he fired them. Was it appropriate for the president to be talking to the Russians about that?
Well, I mean, let's be clear. Obviously, we don't have aligned interests with Russia. Russia is, Putin in particular, is an enemy of free speech, religion, press, assembly. He's the enemy of many of the things that are at the beating heart of America. So we need to be clear that we don't have aligned interests with Russia. And yet, there's a lot in that last segment that's pretty encouraging for the American people, I think. General McMaster is a special guy. The president should be applauded for having him in place. And I think he said clearly in that interview, I heard most of your segment, he said the biggest problem between U.S. and Russian relations is Russian behavior. That's a pretty good thing to have the administration acknowledging.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. But if you listen to the whole interview, it also sounded like the president didn't even confront Russia on the election interference. This was his first meeting with a high-level Russian official. The president disparaged the person investigating Russia, didn't apparently confront them on their own interference.
Yeah, no, clearly, we need to know a lot more about what happened in 2016. Russia has bad motives toward the U.S., past, present, and future. We need to know more about 2016, and the American people should applaud the appointment of Bob Mueller this week as special counsel. I also think we need to be looking to the future, because what comes next in 2018 and 2020 is more aggressive Russian behavior, augmented by new kinds of technology that are going to make the erosion of American public trust even easier for Russia to advance. So obviously, we, the American people, all across the political spectrum and in both the legislative and the executive branches, need to be confronting the challenge that we face from Russia going forward, as well as see the investigation play out about last cycle.
You're a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's been a remarkable 10 days of news coming out of the White House ever since the president fired James Comey. We've learned reports that the president asked Comey for a loyalty pledge back in January, that in February he told Comey he hopes that he'll close the Flynn investigation, the firing of Comey, saying that Russia was on his mind, and then he tells the Russians the pressure is off the next day. When you put that all together, when you see that pattern, what does it tell you?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot that's troubling about that. There's also a lot that we don't know yet. And I want to underscore how good it is for America that Bob Mueller has this position. This is a decorated Marine through to U.S. attorney to head of the criminal division to, bipartisan applauded head of the FBI for 12 years. Lots of good stuff for the American people to put hope in about the fact that Bob Mueller is going to conduct that investigation. But frankly, we all need to be looking forward to the task of trying to rebuild trust in a lot of these institutions. The FBI doesn't take loyalty pledges to an individual. The FBI is a special institution that is supposed to be defending the American Constitution by letting investigative paths go where they lead. And obviously, when you're an agent at the Bureau all the way up to the director of the Bureau, you don't take a loyalty pledge. That's a specific agency that has a really hard job, and we need the American people to know that they can trust the FBI in the future. And so everybody needs to be taking it upon themselves to say, what am I doing now to advance the ability of the American people to trust in institutions of our government like the Bureau in the future?
Well, that's one of the big questions. Do you think the president is doing that? You're a Republican, but you made no secret during the campaign of your opposition to candidate Trump, and you said he displayed no understanding at the time of our constitutional system. Are the fears you expressed in the campaign playing out now?
Listen, the problems that we face in terms of not having a shared understanding of why America has limited government and what the constitutional structure of checks and balances are supposed to protect, that problem isn't a problem just in the last 4 months. It isn't a problem just in the last 18 months. We've had an erosion of an understanding of basic American civics for decades. But yeah, I am concerned that at this particular moment, there's not enough long-term thinking about how we restore an understanding of the American structure of government. So I wish that everybody in government, including in particular the president, would spend a lot more time and energy saying, 5 and 10 years from now, am I going to have contributed to a world where American kids understand why the First Amendment is so glorious? Because right now there's a ton of data. Our kids don't understand it, and we're not teaching them. And that starts all across the federal government. And no one's doing enough to restore that.
And that's one of the things you write about in your new book, The Vanishing American Adult. First first of all, as I looked at it, it made me think I have to do a better job of toughening up my kids. But you also make a separate point. You argue that better parenting, building a more resilient generation, is essential to the success of our democracy. Explain what you mean by that.
Listen, we have far too many of our kids that are stuck in a state of perpetual adolescence right now. And that's more our fault than theirs. We're not doing enough to celebrate scar tissue together. Our kids have huge potential, but they are also going to have a demand and a necessity of becoming more resilient than the generations before them, because they're entering an economy where at age 40 and 45 and 50 and 55, they're likely going to get disintermediated not only out of their job and their firm, but out of their entire industry. That's never happened before in human history. We're going to have to build a civilization of lifelong learners. And at the same time as we should be toughening our kids up, we're trying to bubble wrap them a little too much. There's a lot that should be happening as our kids come of age that right now we're not spending enough time attentive to habit formation for our kids. And again, this book is a constructive book. It's 2/3 what should we do about it to do right by our kids. It's only about 1/3 stage setting. It's not a blame-laying book, but to the degree that there's blame to be laid, it's on we, the parents and grandparents, that are not attentive enough to what kind of formative experiences will help our kids.
I got to show everybody a tweet you sent around this week. It was a picture of you and Senator Schumer. Apparently, you were just coming out of the gym. There on the Capitol, you said it looks like Senator Schumer and I are smoking reefer outside a wedding. Little joke right there. But I actually want to use it to get to a serious point, because one of the other things you've been talking about, you've compared Washington right now to a kiddie soccer game, no cooperation across party lines. You're sitting there talking to the Democratic leader, Senator Schumer. Some of your Republican colleagues are saying now is the time to abandon this partisan effort on health care and work towards a bipartisan proposal. Is that the right way right now?
Well, I'll come back to health care, but let's say a prior point first. When I say that Washington's like kiddie soccer, what I really mean is there's a whole bunch of frenzy and almost never strategy. So fundamentally, the American people don't really know what the priority set is for Washington. I'm the third or fourth most conservative guy in the Senate by voting record, so I'm not making an argument for a mushy middle on policy, but I am making an argument for saying, how do we prioritize what core issues we should be focused on for 5 and 10 and 15 years from now? Because this city is obsessed with short-termism. So that's really what I mean by kiddie soccer. But on health care, I think it's pretty clear that the 5 and 10 and 15-year agenda for America should be that we create a health care system where the American people can buy the policy that they want and take it with them across job and geographic change. Right now, I think Obamacare exacerbates more problems than it solves. I think it needs to be fully repealed and replaced. But we Republicans also need to admit that the American health care system wasn't doing what it needed to do pre-Obamacare. So the problems didn't originate with Obamacare. They're much deeper than that. And as we transition to a more mobile, portable economy, we need the American people to know they're going to be able to buy a policy that goes with them across job and geographic change. Right now, Washington isn't focused on that. It's more shirts and skins exercise of who wants to be more for or more against Obamacare. The challenge before us is longer term than that.
Senator Sasse, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for being in Nebraska, George.